Every Sunday, in churches all around the world, Christians stand and recite a single short statement of belief. It is called the Apostles' Creed, and it is one of the oldest summaries of Christian faith we have. In the middle of that creed, there is a line that almost nobody fully understands. After saying that Christ was crucified, died, and was buried, the creed adds 4 words: He descended into hell. For most of Christian history, those 4 words pointed to one of the most dramatic events in the entire Christian story. Between the cross on Friday and the empty tomb on Sunday, the early church believed Christ did something extraordinary. He went down. He entered the realm of the dead. He confronted Satan in his own kingdom, and he brought out in triumph the righteous souls who had been waiting since the beginning of human history. This event has a name. It is called the Harrowing of Hell. For 1,000 years, it was one of the central images of Easter. Today, almost no Christian could describe it. Welcome. My name is Brother Aurelian, and today I want to take you somewhere most channels never go. Today we trace what the earliest Christians believed actually happened on Holy Saturday. That is, the silent day between the cross on Friday and the empty tomb on Sunday. We will follow this story through the Bible itself and through the 2nd century church fathers. We will also trace it through the most famous apocryphal text and through 15 centuries of Christian art. Every source I cite today is linked in the description below. All of it is open access. All of it is verifiable. By the end, you will understand a doctrine almost the entire modern Protestant world has quietly let slip away. The biblical foundations of this teaching are scattered, but once you see them, they are everywhere. The earliest hint comes in the first epistle of Peter, chapter 3, verses 18 through 20. Peter writes that Christ was put to death in the flesh, but made alive in the spirit. Then comes a strange sentence. In that spirit, the text says, he went and proclaimed to the spirits in prison. These spirits, Peter says, had been disobedient long ago, in the days of Noah, before the great flood. A few verses later, in chapter 4, verse 6, Peter says something even stranger. The gospel, he writes, was preached even to those who are dead. This is the most direct New Testament statement of a mission by Christ to the realm of the dead. The letter to the Ephesians, chapter 4, also seems to point to a descent. Paul writes that when Christ ascended on high, he first descended into the lower parts of the earth. In the book of Acts, chapter 2, the Apostle Peter preaches at Pentecost and quotes Psalm 16. He says that Christ's soul was not abandoned to Hades, and his flesh did not see corruption. The Greek word Peter uses is Hades, the same word the Greek Old Testament uses for the realm of the dead. In the Gospel of Matthew chapter 27, the moment of Jesus' death is followed by an unusual report. The tombs were opened, the text says, and many bodies of the holy ones who had fallen asleep were raised. These are scattered fragments, but for the early church, they were not random. They were pieces of a single picture. The picture is this. After dying on the cross, Christ entered the realm where every human soul had gone since Adam. And he did not enter it as a captive. He entered it as a king. So if you put all these scattered biblical hints together, a remarkable story begins to take shape. The earliest Christians did not invent this from nothing. They were reading these passages in light of an existing Jewish framework. In Second Temple Judaism, the realm of the dead, Hades or Sheol in Hebrew, was not yet heaven or hell. It was a single underground waiting place where all souls went after death, righteous and unrighteous alike. For Christians, the question was simple. What happened to that waiting realm when Christ himself entered it? The earliest extended discussion of this idea appears in writings of the 2nd century. Ignatius of Antioch, writing around the year 107, mentions a striking detail. He says Christ rose from the dead with those righteous ones who had died long before him. A generation later, Justin Martyr, the philosopher convert who wrote around the year 150, claims that this doctrine was already widespread. Justin even quotes what he calls a missing passage from the prophet Jeremiah about the Lord descending to the dead. This passage does not appear in the surviving Hebrew Bible, and modern scholars are not sure where Justin got it from. But its very citation tells us how early the descent tradition already was. Around the year 170, the Bishop Melito of Sardis wrote one of the most beautiful texts of early Christianity. His Easter homily, called Peri Pascha, or On the Pascha, was lost for centuries and recovered only in the 20th century. In it, Christ speaks in his own voice. "I am the one," he says, "who destroyed death and triumphed over the enemy. I am the one," the text continues, "who led you up to the heights of heaven." The poetic confidence of Melito tells us the descent was already a settled part of Christian preaching by his day. The great theologian Irenaeus of Lyon, around the year 180, makes the doctrine still more explicit. In his major work Against Heresies, Irenaeus describes Christ descending to the souls of the righteous patriarchs. He went down to them, Irenaeus writes, in order to free them and to lead them up into his own kingdom. In the 4th century, the great Syriac poet Ephraim the Syrian gave the doctrine its most lyrical voice. In his Hymns on the Nativity and on the Resurrection, Ephraim pictures the gates of Sheol shattering at Christ's arrival. Origen of Alexandria, the most learned biblical scholar of the 3rd century, wrote about Christ's descent in his commentaries. For Origen, the descent was a missionary act, extending Christ's salvation to those who died before the gospel. By the end of the 4th century, the descent was no longer a marginal idea. It was central Christian doctrine. And then, somebody decided to write the whole event down, in full narrative detail. The text that finally tells the whole story, scene by scene, is one of the most fascinating apocrypha in early Christian literature. It is called the Gospel of Nicodemus, or sometimes the Acts of Pilate. The text is anonymous, written in Greek, and most scholars date it somewhere between the 4th and 5th centuries. It has 2 parts. The first part retells the trial of Jesus before Pontius Pilate. The second part is what concerns us. It is called Descensus Christi ad Inferos, the descent of Christ to the underworld. This second half claims to come from 2 figures named Karinus and Leucius, raised after the crucifixion. According to the text, both men were among the dead in Hades when Christ arrived. They wrote down what they saw. The story they tell is astonishing. Listen to it carefully, because it shaped Christian imagination for over 1,000 years. The souls of all the righteous dead were gathered in the deepest part of Hades, waiting in darkness. Adam was there. Eve was there. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, David, the prophets, all of them. Then a brilliant light, brighter than the sun, suddenly pierced the darkness of the underworld. The patriarchs trembled. Adam recognized the light. So did John the Baptist, who had recently arrived to announce the Lord. In the Gospel of Nicodemus, Satan and a personified Hades have a panicked conversation about the incoming light. Satan boasts that he has finally killed Jesus on the cross. Hades replies in horror. "If you have brought this one down here," Hades says, "you have destroyed us both forever." Then Christ arrives at the very gates of the underworld in full divine glory. A voice cries out, "Lift up your gates, O princes, and the King of glory shall come in."
Christ shatters the bronze gates of Hades. The locks and bars are broken to pieces. Death is bound in chains. Satan is handed over and trampled underfoot. And Christ takes Adam by the right hand. "Come," he says, "with all my saints." He leads them out of the underworld in a long procession of patriarchs, prophets, and the righteous of Israel. He brings them, the text says, into the paradise that had been closed since the fall of Adam. This narrative is not in the Bible. It is apocryphal. The early church never accepted it into the canon. But almost every Christian artist, hymn writer, and theologian for the next 1,000 years knew this story by heart.
And it became the imaginative blueprint for what happened on the silent Holy Saturday. Now here is where this whole story splits in two very different directions. The Eastern and Western Christian worlds would take the same tradition along separate paths. In the Eastern Christian world, the harrowing of hell became something almost unimaginable in modern Western Christianity. It became, quite remarkably, the central visual image of Easter itself for the East. In Eastern Orthodox theology, the resurrection of Christ is not depicted as Christ rising alone from a tomb. It is depicted as Christ standing on the broken gates of Hades, pulling Adam and Eve out of their graves. This icon is called the Anastasis, the Greek word for resurrection. It is the standard Easter icon in every Orthodox church to this day. If you have ever been inside an Orthodox church on Pascha, you have seen this image without knowing what it was.
The earliest surviving examples of the Anastasis icon date from the 8th and 9th centuries. By the 11th century, masterpieces appear at Daphne Monastery near Athens, and at the Cathedral of St. Sophia in Kiev. The most famous version is in the side chapel of the Kora Church in modern Istanbul, painted around 1315. Christ stands in a mandorla of light, his feet planted firmly on the shattered gates of Hades. He lifts Adam and Eve up by their wrists, drawing them out of stone tombs. Adam and Eve are not stepping out under their own power. Christ is pulling them up, bodily, out of stone tombs. Beneath his feet, in the darkness, lies a bound figure, Satan, tied with the broken locks of the underworld. To the side stand David and Solomon in royal robes, John the Baptist, and the prophets who foretold this moment. This is, for Orthodox Christianity, what Easter actually is. Not just a private rising, a cosmic rescue mission.
In the medieval West, the doctrine developed along a different but related path. The great Latin father Augustine, writing around the year 400, accepted the descent, but argued cautiously about its meaning. By the High Middle Ages, the doctrine was being formalized within scholastic theology. Thomas Aquinas treated it systematically in his Summa Theologica, in the third part, question 52. For Aquinas, Christ's soul truly descended to a region he called the Limbus Patrum, the limbo of the fathers. This was where the righteous Jews of the Old Testament had been waiting, unable to enter heaven until Christ's atonement was complete. Christ descended, Aquinas argued, to free these holy souls and bring them into the beatific vision of God. In Western medieval art, scenes of the harrowing flourished. They appear in stained glass windows, in psalters, in cathedral sculpture. The 15th century painter Andrea Mantegna gave us one of the most powerful versions: Christ stepping out of a dark stone mouth. In England, the harrowing became the subject of medieval mystery plays performed at Easter for entire towns. It was, simply, part of how Christianity told its central story for over 1,000 years. And then, in the 16th century, the Reformation arrived, and everything changed.
The Protestant reformers inherited the line in the Apostles' Creed that said Christ descended to hell, but they were deeply uncomfortable with the medieval imagery of a literal underground rescue. Martin Luther accepted the descent, but kept his interpretation deliberately vague and pastoral. John Calvin took a far more radical step in his Institutes of the Christian Religion, Book 2, Chapter 16. For Calvin, Christ never literally went anywhere after death. The descent to hell was metaphorical. What it really meant, Calvin argued, was that Christ suffered the spiritual torments of damnation on the cross itself. He bore the wrath of God in his soul. That suffering, Calvin said, was what the creed actually meant. This reinterpretation, more than any other single move, severed the doctrine from the rich tradition behind it. For most modern Protestants, the line in the creed became either an embarrassment or an empty formula. Many modern English translations of the Apostles' Creed now read, "He descended to the dead," removing the word hell entirely. Some Protestant denominations have quietly dropped the line altogether from their printed creeds. What was once the central image of Easter in the East became, in the West, a near-forgotten footnote. So what really happened on Holy Saturday, between the cross and the empty tomb? The honest answer, of course, is that no scholar can say for certain. The event is, by definition, beyond historical verification. But what we can say with confidence is what the earliest Christians believed had happened. They believed that the death of Jesus was not the end of the story, not even for a single moment. They believed that on the silent day between the cross and the resurrection, Christ entered the place where every human soul went. They believed he confronted the powers that had held humanity captive since the very beginning. They believed he shattered the gates and bound the chains and led out, in triumph, every righteous soul who had been waiting. This belief was not invented in the medieval period. It is everywhere in the texts of the 2nd century church. It is anchored in the New Testament itself, in passages most modern readers walk straight past without seeing them. It is the standard Easter image of more than 300 million Eastern Christians today. And it is one of the most extraordinary pieces of Christian theology ever advanced. It is the claim that no part of human reality, not even the realm of the dead, lies beyond divine love. That, in the end, is what the Harrowing of Hell was really about. It was the early church's way of saying that no human soul, no matter how distant, is finally beyond rescue. So the next time you stand in church and recite that strange old line, you will know what it once meant. It is one of the boldest claims in the entire Christian tradition, and it deserves to be remembered. If careful source-by-source unpacking like this is what you came here for, please subscribe to the channel. Twice a week, we explore the figures, traditions, and forgotten chapters Christianity has only half remembered. Every claim in today's video is sourced in the description below. Primary texts, peer-reviewed articles, museum archives, all open access. Check them. Argue with them. That is the only way this kind of work stays honest over time. Until then, thank you for watching, and please, keep asking the difficult questions about your own tradition.